Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liam Macklin, AP US teacher and AP Europe teacher, coming to you live from New York, actually coming to you live from my daughter's bedroom, still in quarantine in New York. So does everyone hear me loud and clear? Okay, great. Yes. All right, so welcome to this Q&A section. Can anyone tell us where they're coming from today? I'm from New York. Anybody else from New York here? What states? Texas, Florida, California, Washington. It's got to be early over there in California. Great. Nobody has got classes today. Everyone is joining the Q&A. Great. Awesome. All right. So today Q&A, you can use the function in the bottom, ask questions. If you have any questions, specifically historical questions, we'll try to cover it. As we know, the APUSH exam is going to be period 3 to 7. So we're looking around 1754 till the end of period 7. So that's like 1945, like going into World War II. So that's pretty much the parameters of our exam. And we're going to have a DBQ with 5 questions. We constantly have information coming in. The latest thing the AP board released is like a demo option, so you can practice doing the exam or logging in. So if you could just Google demo AP exam, you probably go straight into that page, and you can just write the word practice, and you can just practice the exam. So I have a couple of documents or a couple of things to give some tips about the DBQ. If you guys don't have specific question, live from another person from New York, awesome. If you don't have any specific questions about historical events, we can go over the DBQ, maybe some tips. Here's a link, thank you. So if you don't have any specific historical questions for today, we can go over on the DBQ format or some of the tips that I'm telling my students to go about, and we can work from that. So let's see. All right, so again, other than this, remember Fibable's got a whole host of other streams that you can go about using. Thursdays usually the AP historical streams, AP Europe, APUSH, and World. So again, remember also for next year if you're going about, let me make the screen bigger. Okay. And today's session is a Q&A, but we're trying to give you some tips about DBQ to work for the exam. And remember, if you have ask a question, it's a Q&A section. So any historical questions or DBQ, I'll try to answer to my best of my abilities. So use the bottom option. By the way, can anyone tell us what kind of a DBQ would you like to see? What is your strong topic? What would you be like dying to get a DBQ on? Civil War, Reconstruction, or the New Deal. We haven't had the New Deal in a long, long time. Every year people saying this year it's got to be the New Deal. Colonial history, any other period? Racial discrimination, yep. So that can be a great continuity and change. Yeah, that could be a good topic. Any other topics people would love to get a DBQ if you can pick it? Now, Revolutionary War, Jacksonian Democracy. Well, I mean, I'm like, that could be it. I mean, I'm thinking maybe Jacksonian Democracy, that's a great topic for a DBQ. It hasn't been there in a long time. I think we're just gambling. We have no idea. But like, I would actually practice Jacksonian Democracy. That's a very big topic. Don't avoid that one. Another option they can go about with the DBQ, usually DBQs are covering 20 to 30 years period. So you might get a question like a Jackson DBQ, let's say like 1816 to like 1836 or something like that. Or like Reconstruction, like 1863 up to like 1877. That's usually the way they did the DBQ. One option that some people are floating around that we might have a very long DBQ, like a thematic DBQ that will cover like 100 years period. Maybe grab 2 periods together in one DBQ. So you should also think about maybe a longer DBQ is also an option. There's pretty much always some aspect of racial discrimination in the period. I mean, I kind of heard like that theory, like a lot of people floating, that's always about women, race, or Native Americans. There is definitely a theme going on with AP exam that they're trying to always bring that like a social aspect into it. But yeah, I wouldn't bet on it all the time. All the last DBQs we had the last few years have been around the 20th century. Now, we only got to 1945, so a lot of people are thinking maybe 19th century. This is the year for the 19th century because we haven't finished the 20th century. But I'm thinking, yeah, there's no way to know. Maybe 19th century will be a good bet. All right, let's get question number 1. Does anyone know what the score is on the rubric to earn a 3 or above? Okay, so this year I'm going to go over the rubric right now. There's 10 points on the table. It was 7 points in the original rubric 7-point essay. Now it's a 10-point essay. So we don't know necessarily what grade you need to pass this exam, but I'm assuming if it's 10 points, I'm assuming like a 5 you will probably pass. But it also depends on what everybody else is scoring in this exam, okay? So let's say the highest everyone is getting in this exam is an 8, then 8 becomes the 5, and then like a 7 becomes a 4, and going about that. If a lot of students are going to get 10, which I doubt it, then a 10 will be a 5. So it also depends where everyone is scoring. They're average it out, and then they're going to set up like basically a guide for that. All right, so let's go a little bit into the DBQ, but excellent question. Keep it coming. Let's get into a couple of things that we want to know, basics for this exam in DBQ. So we know for now that the APUSH exam is going to be 2 p.m. on Eastern time. So everyone makes their calculation based upon your location. And we know that also before the exam starts, you're going to have 30 minutes to log in. So if it's 2 p.m., and again, I'm in Eastern time, everyone make their own calculation. You're going to log in 30 minutes before. And again, you can do the demo. There's probably, they said something of a typing test. Just make sure your computer is working and everything is top in. You have like an e-ticket to log in. Basically, your school code. You need your school code to get into the exam, and you're going to fill up information about your identity and wait for the exam to start automatically. So again, recommendation, get a private room, lock it out, tell family members not to come in to give you your whatever hour that you need, and make sure like it's isolated, there won't be any noise and something bad happens to you during that time. Now at 2, officially the exam will start at 2, and then you have 45 minutes to complete the exam. Altogether it's 50 minutes, but the division of time is 45 minutes to write the exam and 5 minutes to submit the exam, okay? So 45 minutes you're gonna type your exam, you're starting at 2. When it's around 2:45, you're gonna have like some light starting, or some red thing they said is gonna flash, that's the time to submit the exam. But don't get greedy, people. Don't wait for the last minute. They said 5 minutes is submission. You don't know if your computer is going to crash, if something is going to get stuck, if it's going to load slowly. I don't know your internet speed, what's going to happen. I would say send it in even a few minutes before, just to be on the safe side. Okay, and maybe even take a picture of your screen just to show that you submitted that stuff. So that's basically the foundation of what's going to happen specifically on that exam. And if you're going to miss the deadline, then you get 0 points. So if you're going to mess up and wait for the last minute and submit it, I think these guys are going to be cold. They're not going to care about the whole situation. If you did the copy and paste and you missed that time, that you're out. Don't also press back. Don't press the back key throughout the whole exam. Whatever you're doing, don't press back. It's going to mess up the whole thing. Also, they said, I'm just trying to recap all the stuff that we heard in the webinar meeting. Try to have an updated browser. Use things like Firefox, Safari. Don't use Internet Explorer. Does anyone still use Internet Explorer? So we're afraid that that's not going to work. They said specifically don't use that. There's also an option if the exam crashes, there's going to be some disturbance. If you're going to have any of these sort of things that you want to see, type the best that you can or save your document on your computer. And once it's completed, basically issue the submission. So hopefully nobody will have, there's 3, I think, options for submission. You can do a copy and paste, you can upload the documents, but you can see all that stuff in the exam situation. Now here's a very crucial thing. We're talking about plagiarism. So you're allowed to have notes in advance, written notes on the side. You're allowed to have textbook, and I think also they're fine with you searching on the internet. But that's a dangerous thing. If you're going to waste a lot of time searching on the internet, you might lose track of your exam. What you do not want to do is you do not want to copy and paste directly from a source. You do not want to quote directly from the book. If you do a copy and paste, they will recognize it and your exam will be disqualified. What you're going to do is you're going to try to rephrase that information. Okay, it's the same thing when you're going to have 5 documents. You're not copying what's inside the document. You're trying to rephrase it. So don't use any social media devices during that time. They have some software, I guess, like to detect if you did a copy and paste. So basically, you have all the information you need in the world next to you. It's an open book test, but don't do a copy and paste because that's very easy plagiarizing. All right, let's see what we have here. I see a lot of comments popping up. All right, let's see, ask a question. Should we ask our school code from our teachers? Yes. So ask your teachers, or every school's got a school coordinator. They should give you a specific code that you log into the exam. It's very, very important that you have the school code in advance. They also send a checklist what you need in advance. That's probably the most important thing. And I think also on each page of the exam that you're going to submit, on the top, I think you're going to write your school code and your name underneath it, or the initials of your name. But yes, but definitely ask your teacher about that and your school coordinator. All right, let's see if we have more comments. So bring them into, if you want to chat between yourself, chat in the chat room. If you have a question specifically on stuff that I'm saying, use the bottom here as ask a question, because I see a lot of people posted some stuff, or some people posted some links. I don't know what the links are for. Yes, the links for the thing. Okay, good. All right, let's continue. So I'm just going to continue working on the DBQ thing, and if you see any questions, something that pops during the time, use the ask a questions. So let's talk about a couple of the tips that we want to go prepare for this exam. I would say, so we have period 3 to 7. That's the periods we know that the APUSH exam is upon. I would say maybe make packages for each period. Make period 3 package, make period 4, 5, 6, 7 on your table. Once you're going to see the exam in that period of time question, that's your package that you're going to use for note. The textbook is going to take way, way too long to open the book and start looking around and trying to figure out, your information. You're wasting time. So have a package next to you. In the package, you probably want to have bullet points, like a summary of the main people, main events, outside document, and so forth. So first piece of advice, organize your notes next to you in advance in period times, and when you see what the topic is, use that package. Okay? Next. We will probably talk about it. One of the best strategy, of course, when you see your DBQ question is to try to group the documents. You're going to get 5 documents. Try to see very quickly as you go and summarize the documents if you can find a connection between the documents. Does anyone here, their teachers, when they taught you technique for studying for writing an essay on going over the document, did anyone study the technique of grouping documents? Can you make notes with other people? I mean, yeah, you can make your notes in advance, just write them next to it. If they find that you guys wrote exactly the same thing, we'll be a little bit suspicious, but yes, summary notes. Does anyone, yeah, I mean, just have your copies in advance, put them next to you. If you do it with other people, that's fine, but don't write exactly a similar paragraph as the next person. everyone just writes their own thing. So does anyone study the group techniques? All right, so a group technique, grouping the documents, is whatever the thesis question is, you're going to try to group the documents. And again, because we have 5 documents, you might want to find 2 groups. Try to find similarities between the documents. If you find similarities between the document, that can be the foundation of your thesis. So whatever it is, let's say it's about women's right DBQ, and the essay is asking about whether women rights women successful or not. Look at the documents, find documents showing that they're successful, try to find documents that they're showing it was a failure. One group will be success, one group would be failures. That's how you group documents. There's many ways to go about it. Let's say there is an essay about socialism in America or capitalism, trying to look at the documents. Which are the socialists, which are the capitalists? Context, I would start recommending with the new rubric, maybe to do it in the end. So we'll talk about that in a second. So that's kind of like general tips. Citing documents, a very important thing about one of the classic mistakes that people lose points in the exam is that they just copy the words from the document. And they just say document 1 said, and then they just copy what's in the document. The person can read what's inside the document. What you want to do is summarize and rephrase what's in the document. The first point that you get for using the document is just summarizing the documents. Don't copy the documents, okay? Make a specific reference also to which document you're talking about. So either say document 1 and explain what it is, or say the name of the person in the end, use brackets like say document 1. Another example, another tip to write a DBQ is starting each paragraph with a topical sentence. And if anyone taken AP English or AP Lit or things like that, anyone study what a topical sentence is? Yes? Great. Topical sentence just sets you up before you jump into the document and go straight into document number 1. Just set them up what's in the group, because this is the group that is going to say women had success. So just say in a topical sentence, just set up what you're going to talk about before that. It kind of sets up the mood. So the reader of the exam will know what this paragraph is about. This paragraph is the causes for the South secession. This paragraph is about the causes of Northern aggression or whatever it is. The first sentence kind of sets up what you're going to talk about in that specific paragraph. So each paragraph, I will probably say, begin with a topical sentence. And finally, if you have enough time, you can use all 5 documents. One of the biggest challenges I'm going to see for this specific exam is that you only have 45 minutes and you have 5 documents. Now you can still get a 10 if you use 4 documents. You might not necessarily need to use all 5 documents. We usually, if we can, we use all 5 documents in case we messed up one of the documents. Usually the hardest document is which one? Anyone knows? The document that students mess up the most? Pictures. Yes, usually images are the one that everyone constantly, year after year, mess it up with images, because there's like misinterpretation. They read things the wrong way. They don't look into the image. So images, I'm assuming 5 documents in this exam. I'm assuming one of them is going to be a visual aid. So one way to tackle that, look at your textbook, try to go over all the visual aids in it. That probably will help you out. Uncle Sam appears in a lot of images, so that's one easy way also to tackle some of these DBQ images. But take into consideration there's 5 documents. One of them you might not understand. Reading it, it will be too complex, so you won't know what the heck they're talking about. So take into consideration if there's 5 documents on the table, one you might not understand or know anything about, and one might drag you a lot of time to read. So you should be thinking of 3 to 4 documents that you will understand from this DBQ. But if you have the time, if you think you're doing very well, use all 5 documents, okay? And again, it depends on the topic. Let's say you get the topic that you're very, very good at, and then you're like, okay, I got this. I'm going to use all of them. I know my historical context, but let's say there's going to be a topic you're not that strong at. You're going to have to get into the documents and figure out what's going on in them. So to summarize, main points of the tips from my viewpoint is context and thesis are basically exactly the same the way you studied them the whole year. There's nothing big changes over here. 1 point for context, 1 point for thesis. Try to group the documents the best that you can, trying to find a connection between the documents. Unit 3 to 7s, organize them in advance, the notes. And one big thing for notes in advance, this year we have 2 points for outside evidence. It used to be 1 point for outside evidence. This one we have 2. These, I think, are going to be maybe the 2 easiest points to rack up in this exam because you guys have open notes. So for each period, I would highly recommend to write as many examples of outside evidence as you know and set them up before the exam. Complex understanding, I think it's too complicated to try to do in 45 minutes. I won't even think about getting that point. Okay, so now let's go into the rubric. Any questions up till now? So I'm trying to stop and follow up. If you have any questions, use the ask the question. I see a lot of stuff in the chatter here, but I can't follow up. Is there a minimum for amount of docs you can use? I mean, no, nobody sets up a minimum. You can use, I think you need to, I think maybe 2 at the minimum that you have to use because you have to describe at least 2 documents at least, or to have two POVs on 2 documents. So 2 at the minimum, but the minimum I would use at least 3. I would not go to 2, at least do 3. Should we source 2 or 3 documents? Okay, let's go over that, how sourcing the documents, how it goes about. Okay, so here's the new rubric they gave us for this year exam. You guys all year long have been studying a 7-point rubric. Now they move it into 10 points. So you guys have been studying for 1 hour, now it's 45 minutes. So we have to tackle a new format of exam and we have only 45 minutes to go about. So you might want to think of a strategy, which document to use, how to tackle them. So thesis is exactly the same. Your thesis, you might see a question and your head will say, I have a thesis about it, but your thesis depends on the documents. You think that the Women's Woman was a great success, then all the documents are talking about failures, then your thesis is going to be it's a failure. You think Andrew Jackson is the best president ever, then all the documents are telling you he's a horrible president, then your thesis is going to be he's a horrible president. The thesis is based upon the documents. The documents are going to back up your thesis. Context is the background to the story, just what happens before the story. So let's say it's the writing of the Constitution. So my context is going to be the American Revolution, just something that happens just before or setting up my mode. This could be something like 3 or 4 sentences to get the context. Another thing with context that people mess up, they make it too vague. I would say drop at least 1 real piece of information in your context to make it a little bit more accessible to the people. If I mention the American Revolution, just give 1 event if that's your context to mention something that happens in the American Revolution. If I'm going to talk about rise of industrialization, maybe drop in, I don't know, Rockefeller or Carnegie as a robber baron as an example to show a little bit context. So thesis and context, historical background, same thing. Thesis, exactly the same thing. Now going into how many documents we're going to use. From the documents, you can score 5 points, okay? So we have thesis, 1 point. We have context, 1 point, exactly the same before. So people hit for 3 documents. Okay, let me just go. I'll go over all the documents, how you get them, and then we'll get to the question, how you score each thing. Thesis, 1 point. Context, another point. We're clear about that? All good? Can we move to the next point? All right, great. Let's move on. Next up, from 5 documents, you need to describe 2 documents. This is the easiest point you're going to get from the whole thing. describe what's in the document is going to give you 1 point. So you got 5 documents, 2 of them just describe what's in the document. Whatever the document talks about, you're just going to summarize and repeat what they said in the document. Like document number 1, I don't know, Abigail Adams tells her husband, don't forget the ladies, tells them, you know, that when they're discussing the future of America, that he will remember the equality of women, whatever it is. Document number 2 is Frederick Douglass from his autobiography, Up from Slavery, describing the hardship of slavery, yada, yada, yada. Just describe what's in the document. You do description of 2 documents, you get 1 point, okay? So that's the 3rd point. Any questions up to here? Beautiful. Moving on. Next up is support the argument. Basically, there's 3 things you need to do with the documents. 1 is to describe what's inside the document. That's the easy one. Just describe what they wrote in the document. Number 2 is support the argument. This connects back to the thesis. You have to find evidence in the document that backs up your thesis, okay? So let's say my essay question was Reconstruction a success or a failure, okay? I'm gonna look through my 5 documents, group them, see which documents show Reconstruction was a success, show which documents are failure. So let's say paragraph 1, I say it's a success. So then I have to back up my argument using the document. So I would look at the document and show that it was a success. So I would say, I don't know, the 15th Amendment. Here's an example of a success of Reconstruction. So I say the 15th Amendment allowed African Americans the right to vote. Hence, I prove my thesis that was a success. So the next thing you need to do is you support your argument with 2 documents. 2 documents, support the argument, you get your next point, okay? You use 2 documents to support your argument, you get 2 points. Now, if you support your argument with 4 documents, then you get 2 points. So support with 2 documents, 1 point. Support with 4, you get 2 points. Does that make sense? I know I say 2, 4, 2, 4, it can kind of get confusing. Basically, you support your argument with 2 documents, you get 1 point. You support it with 4 documents, you get the extra bonus point. Any questions about supporting an argument? You basically have to use the document to support your thesis. Your thesis is based upon the documents. Any questions here? Next, and the last thing that I'm going to use the documents to get points is HIP, also known as some people teachers call it POV plus. POV stands for, anyone, POV? Anyone study POV? What's POV? Point of view. Very good. Point of view analysis. So the last option to get points is after I described the document, after I supported my thesis with the document, the last is for me to get into the document and to kind of give it a HIP analysis or a POV. Now a POV, let me see if I have something on POV. So HIP, so some people teach it HIP and some people say HIPPO because O is for outside evidence. This is where I go into the document and I try to get one of these points. Either historical context, what is happening during that time to help to support my argument, intended audience, who was this document written for? Is it for pro-slavery people? It's for Northerners, it's for Southerners? Who did the writer of this document wanted to give this information for? And finally, these are kind of similar point of view or purpose. They're kind of similar into the fact that the author of the document has a point of view. Where is it coming from? So I'm saying, let's say he's a socialist. So I'm saying he's a socialist. So his point of view, he cares about the workers. So he writes this document, like, let's say if it's Eugene Debs, I'm saying Eugene Debs' point of view, because he's a socialist, he is thinking about the workers. Upton Sinclair in The Jungle, the book, because he is a socialist, he cares more about the workers, and he wrote the book to prove the harsh conditions of the workers. So a POV goes back to the point of view. Another P is the purpose. What was the purpose of this document? So let's look at one example. Let's say I get an image of the Boston Massacre. So let's do a HIP analysis of this document. Can anyone give me what's the historical context of this image? If I don't know what happened during time. Okay, so it's the Boston Massacre. Yes, I know that that's from 1770. What's the historical context? The 7-Year War is something that happened before that, leading up to the Revolutionary War. Okay, so this is what you guys are giving me. I'm giving me historical context before this image. If I'm going to do historical context on the image, if I'm going to do a HIP analysis on the document, I have to talk what's going in the document, not what happened before. That's the first paragraph given a general context. Growing colonial tension, that's context, okay? Soldiers take over the town, control over citizens, taxes, soldiers sent to control laws. Okay, very good. So let's say my document is the Boston Massacre. I'm going stage by stage. First off, I describe what's in the document. That's my first point. So I describe the documents and I'm saying British soldiers are lining up, firing into an American crowd. And I can say, whatever I can see in the document, people are falling into the ground. I can say the soldiers are lined up. I can say it's the Boston Custom House, whatever information. Then I describe it. Now I go for the next part, support my argument. Whatever my argument was. Let's say my argument was tension between soldiers led to the American Revolution, or presence of British soldiers is the cause that led to the American Revolution. So now I use the document to support my thesis in saying it's the presence of the troops as can seen in this image, propaganda image and so forth. And finally, point of view. I have to do a point of view analysis of this document. So now I'm going to the HIP. So what is the point of view of the guy who created this image? Anyone? So what's his POV? What's the POV of this image? British are abusive. British is bad. All right, so the British soldiers are murderous. So I can say the point of view of the guy who made this image is basically saying the British are abusing their power, the British are brutal, the British, it's a massacre, a bloody massacre, and they organized it, they lined up. And if I can go about that. So the historical, one way I can tackle this historical context, it's happening due to rising tendons. Then I can go intended audience. Who did he create this image for? Who is the intended audience for this document? The colonies. So I can figure out he made this image to convince the colonies to support the American Revolution. And then I can go to point of view. English are murderers, or POV, I can go and saying that he is basically saying that the British are killing, and so forth. And then I can even talk about this as a propaganda posters, then I can do my own analysis. So that's how I can tackle all these different things of the historical context, intended audience, point of view, or purpose of the document. Sorry, this would be here, purpose, and then POV should be over here. So I can use any of these 4 things to give a HIP. So one more time. For HIP, for historical contents, intended audience, purpose, and point of view, if I get 1 document HIP, I get 1 point. If I get 2 documents HIP, I get 2 points, okay? And that's how I finally wrap up my 5 points document from using the essay. So one more time, using the documents to get my point. 2 points just describing the documents. Sorry, 2 documents I describe, I get 1 point. Supporting the arguments with 2 or 4 gives me 2 more points. And finally, HIP, I can get 2 more points. So it's all together 5 points. 5 points that I can make by using the documents, okay? Finally, the easier point to get, I believe, would be outside evidence. One example of outside evidence gives me 1 point. 2 points of outside evidence gives me 2 points. Okay? So now my essay is up to 9 possible points. And finally, the hardest point that I'm not even going to try to talk about is complexity, which is hard to do in a regular situation, but with 45 minutes, it's almost impossible. So I will not even teach or try to figure out how to get complexity. Maybe the only angle you might want to look in complexity is kind of contradict yourself from the first paragraph to the second paragraph, but I don't know if you have enough time to go back and forth between these documents. Kind of make the arguments argue with one another is a good way to get that complexity. All right, let's get into questions, what we have up till now. Will there be a multiple version of this exam? Yes, I've heard that they might send different exams to different groups of people trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, I'm assuming that they'll figure so some students will communicate with one another. So that's why I will stay away from social media, even if you just want to know what the other guys are doing. Try to stay away from like social devices or sending any information. I'll say clear yourself for like a day or two, so you'll just be scotch-free from being accused of doing anything. It's like we don't know how far they're going to take this stuff. Can we get feedback from you if we send you practice through the email? I think there's an option in Fibeable of like sending essays and they grade it for you and give it to you back. So look up on Fibeable option that how they can review your essays. Do we have to do all the HIP? You just pick one of the 4 things. You don't have to do the whole thing. I just gave you an example how to do each one of them, but you just pick one. So each document, see the documents that you're the strongest. There are 5 documents. Look at the documents that you think you understand the most, like whatever the topic is. If you know someone, say it's the American Revolution and it's Thomas Paine, Common Sense, and you're like, oh, I know Thomas Paine. So this is the one that I'm going to use for my POV. I would say use the POV for your strongest 2 documents, okay? And another thing is also when you look at these 10 points, you might want to start figuring, what is my strategy? Am I going to go for POV or am I going to go for support the argument? This is going to give me 2 points and this is going to give me 2 points. So what is my strategy? If we're thinking you guys, I don't know, it depends how much you study the whole year. If your strategy, you just want to pass the exam, you're kind of weak, you're thinking I want to get 5 points, what's the 5th easiest for me to pick up? I would say thesis, of course, is easy, it's just 1 sentence. Outside evidence, I think it's easy because that you can have notes in advance. So that's 2 more points that you can do. Describing the document, that should be easy. It just repeats what's in the document. And then you got to pick, are you going to support the argument or POV? One of these 2. If you get it, you will probably get support documents. Oh man, I got lawnmower. Can anyone hear the noise right now? What are the odds? Sorry, they're like cutting the lawn. We're going live. What are the odds? Just under my house. Why, people? Why? That's fine. All right, we can continue. Let's go for more questions. So basically, just to summarize it, you will probably pick or figure out the strategy in advance what you're going to tackle. If you're going to try to tackle everything together, you might not have the time. So outside evidence, definitely use outside evidence. Describing, definitely use describing. But you have to figure out if you're going to go for support the argument or POV, which one is better? And that depends which documents you're going to get. All right, let's move into ask a question. All right, what advice do you have with timing? How long should planning be? So I would say timing-wise, 45 minutes is given to you. I'm saying reading for 10 minutes, writing for 35 minutes. That's what I would do. I would say now, try to practice. If your teachers, hopefully your teachers are giving you DBQs to practice. Fibeable's got some DBQs going online. So I would say try to practice. reading for 10 minutes, summarizing your notes, and writing for 30, 35 minutes. I think, honestly, the biggest obstacle for this exam is timing. I think you need a strategy to come into the exam using some of these documents, and you need to figure out how long. I think the biggest trap is going to be Googling things and starting to look information online and wasting so many minutes. You should be focusing on the documents to read them, to get information from them. It's timing going to be for everyone. But then again, you know, there might be advantage because the exam is only 45 minutes. So the biggest problem with previous AP exams is that they were 3 hours and your concentration is like really, really hard by the time you get to the end of the exam. Here, you just have to be focused, really focused for 45 minutes, get it all you got, and it's going to be quickly, very, very, very quickly over. Is there a method that can help me write a thesis that can earn points for me? The best method, I guess, is just go Google DBQ exams from APUSH and just look at all the previous questions that they gave in the last few years and try to kind of work on your skills of writing a thesis question. Also, if you Google APUSH previous exam in the College Board, you can see all the last year's AP exam questions, and next to them, they usually give you an example of thesis that they would accept. So just go over the whole bunch and write like 10 theses, you know, look at the question, see if you figure out what the question is, then write your thesis, and then later on check what they accepted as a thesis. The more you practice, I guess the better you get into getting a good thesis. Is it okay for my thesis to be more than one sentence? Sure, I mean, thesis can be even 2 or 3 sentences. You just have to remember, what am I doing in a thesis? I'm doing a couple of things. I'm trying to create a thesis that is historical defensible, something that I can prove correct with my argument. I'm going to try to start developing a line of reasoning, something that will go throughout my essay. And finally, promote my multiple points. What is going to be my points in my essays? Negative, positive, social, whatever I'm going for, it's going to be in my thesis. Do you think it should be better to write a 4 or 5 paragraphs? I don't think you're going to have time to write such a long essay with so many paragraphs. My structure that I'm recommending, probably first paragraph is the context and thesis, 1 paragraph, and then I would probably write 2 big paragraphs. 1 big paragraph for my first group of documents, second big paragraph for my second group of paragraphs. I would probably actually only write like 3 paragraphs. If you have the time, you might want to go for a 4th paragraph to kind of restate your thesis, clean it up a little bit, or conclusion. But that's not like required. I would probably do like 3 paragraphs because we only have 45 minutes. First paragraph, thesis, context. Second paragraph, 1 group of document. Third paragraph, 2nd group of documents. So how many points on a DBQ do I need to get a 5? Or is it going to be based on the exam takers this year? Yes, it's based upon the other exam takers during this year. At the end of the exams, they're going to average it out, and it depends on what people are scoring. So if the highest score is going to be an 8, 8 is going to be a 5. If the highest score is going to be a 10 and a 9, I'm pretty sure if you get a 9, that's going to be a 5. Maybe an 8. Depends on the situation. I'm assuming 10 and 9, of course, is going to be a 5. 8 and 7, it's probably a 4. And 6 and 5 are a 3. But that's before I get the exam grades. By the way, does anyone know what was the average of a 7-point DBQs up till now in most exams throughout the years? Out of 7 points, guess how much people got? 4, 5, 3. Okay, nobody's still getting close. So brace yourself, people. The average, yes, there we go, 2. So the average for most DBQs up till now, from 7 points, usually students scored like 2.5. So that's, and a few years ago, nobody even got any points for documents. That's what they added a few years ago, like describe the document. That's like the easiest thing. Nobody even got points on documents. Granted that it was a 3-hour exam and the DBQ is the last part, that people got really, really bad grades. So don't think like that everyone is going to get like 7, 8 like that. So the grade, we should see what the rest of group is doing. So don't think that everyone is gonna doing like I'm not saying it to bum you guys up that you're saying like people got 2 or something. I'm saying that 7 documents was very, very hard in an hour, and that was also the end of the exam. But here you guys are fresh. This is the only thing you have to do. Plus, if you just practice DBQs constantly, this exam might actually be easier than the regular exam because you got open notes. You have, you know that it's going to be a DBQ. You know it's going to be 5 documents. You kind of know everything for this exam. There's not going to be big surprises. The only obstacle is timing. That's your obstacle. So if everyone does a relatively bad, it could be easier to get a 5. Well, again, it depends. Again, if I don't know if statistic or numbers makes you guys feel a little bit better, but like I think most AP historical exam, I think like only 10% of the people got a 5 and like 10% got a 4. And like half like kind of passed and half failed. That's usually what usual AP history exam are averaging around. But again, it depends. Also, if you take into calculation, you got thousands of students that take AP classes and barely show up to class and they fail. So the average depends. You know, you guys aren't fiveable, so you probably will do better because you're investing that extra time. I'm sure a lot of these kids never go online to do an extra session. Where can I find the new rubric for this year DBQ? I think just Google new rubric DBQ. It should be on the AP College Board. Also, your teacher should give it to you. I think Tom Ritchie's got a good DBQ out that kind of simplifies the basic explanation. But what I gave you here pretty much is the foundation of the DBQ. You just have to remember these or write these next to you. And when you go over the exam, you might want to mark next to it, look at this new rubric format here and try to assign to yourself which points are you going for. Just have a strategy in. Which points do you want to tackle? And if you have extra time, go for the next one. Basically decide, are you going for POV or are you going for supporting the argument? Which one are you better at? But that depends also on the document. Yeah, there are many people that wrote things out. Any ask questions format? Does anyone have historical questions? Also, this is not just on DBQ rubric. Does anyone want to ask a historical question? Let me do one more thing about Hippo. Here's another example. If we get something on industrialization, let's say we get this cartoon. Can anyone give me a HIP analysis on this cartoon? Historical context, intended audience, point of view, purpose. So it's called The Bosses of the Senate. So what am I seeing in this cartoon? If I get this, can I do a HIP analysis on this document? Political machine, very good. It's blurry. Political bosses. Boss tweet. The bosses, Tammany Hall, corruption, boss tweet. Okay, so a lot of you are mentioning boss tweet, but he's actually not seen in this cartoon. So again, couple of ways, again, attacking documents. First, it's in the title, the bosses of the Senate. So I'm assuming, and again, this is the Senate of the United States. And usually, anytime you see somebody's overweight, what does overweight usually makes connection to? He is rich, okay? Trust and monopolies, very good. Wealth and power. So again, another way of tackling documents, anytime you see somebody who's heavy in weight, weight is usually connected to corruption. You're big, why? Because you eat and you steal and you're greedy. So this is an example of a cartoon, bosses of the Senate. These guys are the one who are controlling the little guys in the Senate. And also you can see on their chests, if you can read, that they're representing trust, big monopoly organization like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and so forth. So based on a cartoon like that, what do you think the point of view of the author of this cartoonist is? Pro-business, anti-business, what's the message? The system is corrupt. Okay? Antitrust, machines, anti-business, okay? So that's an example, again, how you would tackle another example of like turn of the century, big bosses controlling over the Senate. Political machine, Boss Tweed, I want to mention Boss Tweed is the boss in New York. He represents political machine, but these guys are like kind of millionaires. So these are kind of two different things. If you have specifically about political machine, if you see an image of Boss Tweed, it probably will say his name, and that will be easier to identify. All right, so that's it about slides for today. Okay, let's get, if you have more questions or historical questions. Let's see what else we have. Okay, could there be, okay, so the question, could there be a DBQ on time period 3 or time period 7? How big should the time be? Period question, 40 to 50 years. So again, we don't know. Usually up till now, all the DBQs have been like a short period of time, 20 to 30 years gap. But we're thinking maybe because it's only one question and they're going to try to grab a bigger period of time because you studied like a lot of periods, maybe it's going to be a thematic DBQ that will cover 100 years. Let's say it could be a DBQ about African Americans for 100 years. Who knows? From like from colonial time up to like Reconstruction. Maybe it can be a women's DBQ, very, very long, from like colonial time up to like getting the right to vote. So it could be a longer DBQ that will grab 2 periods or 3 periods, or it can be just the regular DBQs that we had up to now, only 20, 30 years. If it's a larger time span, would it be expected to be able to pull more information? Would the grader be harsher for having less information? No, it's not that. If there's a longer period of times, I don't think you need to know more information. I think a longer, it's actually great for you. You should want that because that means it will be easier to get outside evidence because you have 100 years versus 20. There's a bigger option for getting outside evidence. I don't think you need to write more information. I would not also use too much historical information. I would concentrate on the documents outside, other than outside information. Okay, if we're taking notes per unit, what are some suggestions recommended to have on the notes? So that's something I think like maybe a review book will help you. You know how review books have kind of like a summary. Fibeable got like unit guides. So I would say like unit guide, you should probably have what time period it is, have a list of all the main people that operated during that time, all the major events that happened that time. So let's say if my unit is Reconstruction, I will write about the 3 major amendments that happened during Reconstruction, Compromise of 1870. Just have all the bullet points of all the major events that happened that time, all the major people that you want to remember that happened during that time. So you won't have to think too hard when you see that unit at that moment. Would it be better to copy notes packets from online from the notebook if I had it from my class? I would just say just your notes, just write them in advance. on a paper next to you, or print them out. Don't start searching on the computer and having like 15 screens open together. The only screen you want to think to be open is the one that you're typing on and the one with the question next to you. So I wouldn't use anything else to make your life more complicated. What periods are the most important? 3 to 7? We have no idea. I think that's the $1 million questions. But that it's just speculating. Nobody knows which period they can ask. It could be just 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. I mean, I can give you my hunch, but like it's worth nothing. You know, every year we make a gamble, and the last few years everybody's like they can't do the 20th century again because they did it the year before, and then they do it every year. So what do we know? I would guess maybe the 19th century. I got a hunch on 19th century, but hey, don't come to Fiveable and sue me for that one. If you're just asking, that's just an opinion. Oh no, I mean, again, it could be the American Revolution. I'm saying just a hunch. What do I know? It's just because we know history. We don't we can't figure out. And also, if they're going to do a couple of different versions of it, so who knows what version where they're going to do. Yeah, I mean, don't just like bank about what you're hoping and saying this is my strong period. Learn the period that you're weak at. You know, people don't bank everything on the Civil War or something. Should we organize by social, political, or economic aspect of every unit? I mean, yeah, that's one way certain teachers teach it. I mean, you can do that. I mean, it depends on the period. I don't know. There's just certain topics that connect to certain periods. If you're doing like kind of like the American Revolution, you need to study the Constitution more or things relating to it than other unions. It depends what's going on during that time. Since it's the anniversary of women's rights, 100 years, it's possible to give a question about that. I mean, we said that, you know, women, minorities, African Americans, those are the things that keep popping up. But we did have a DBQ on women just a few years ago. So people were like, well, they just had a DBQ on women just a few years ago. Do you think they're going to do it again? Possibly, but there's no way to gamble on that one. Women are always relevant. Yeah, I mean, like they probably, you know, okay, so you can say there's a very kind of like a PC thing going on in the AP, the College Board, that they like bringing up all these sort of things. But, you know, they could be just whatever is, yes, you might want to think always in terms about what's going on with women, what goes on with African Americans. So if I'm writing about the American Revolution, the successes, I always got to think, oh, maybe not everyone enjoyed all the benefits of the American Revolution. And I'm like, oh, there's still not equality for women, African Americans. Then I can mention Andrew Jackson and saying democracy is being established in America. More than 1 million people are voting. However, I can say women and African Americans are still not getting it. I mean, basically, you can plug it into any period during that time. So that's very helpful. Any other questions? Does anyone want to come on screen with me and ask a question? Going live. Keyboard was easily damaged. How do you sign up for June exam? Yeah, I think there's another second option, a date. There's the AP board publish. If you can't take the first date, then you take the second date. You should talk to your school coordinator about that. I think everyone automatically is signed up for the first exam date. And if you can't take it, I don't know, just double check what you need for that one. Any other questions? Sorry about that, but there's replays for all of these streams, so just check out the replay. Any other question? Does anyone have an historical question about people, events, presidents, all that stuff? Something I actually am trained to do. Okay, so somebody's eating chips, so we don't need to see them. Very cool. All right. Jacksonian Democracy, important things that you want to note about Jacksonian Democracy. 3 major events you want to remember about the presidency of Andrew Jackson. One is nullification crisis, when South Carolina threatened to leave the United States, how Jackson crushed that rebellion and the compromise they reached with Henry Clay, the great compromiser. So nullification crisis is point number one about Jackson presidency. Point number two is the fight with the Bank of the United States. Jackson fighting against the Bank of the United States. And eventually he is successful in shutting down the Bank of the United States that leads to a big economic collapse. And thirdly, the Trail of Tears, removal of Native Americans from their land and how they took their case to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of the Native Americans, and Jackson ignoring the Supreme Court, famously saying the Supreme Court made its ruling, now let him enforce it. Sorry, something like Justice Marshall has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. So ignoring the Supreme Court. So three major events: nullification, bank fight, and Trail of Tears. So Jackson is very, very important because he's a transformative figure. He's the only person that has an historical period named after him. It's called the Age of Jackson, the only president that we have a period named after. And a transformation from historical America, the first 6 presidents, America was not really a democratic society. It was just controlled by a small elites. And with Jackson being elected as president, now we have a self-made man, somebody who came out of nowhere to become the president of the United States and gets elected by more than 1 million people. So he's very, very important. And also he's the founder of the Democratic Party. Common man, yes, or a self-made man. Remember people like him, Abraham Lincoln. There's definitely something that Americans are connecting to people who were not born with a golden spoon, but had to work to get what they achieved in life. And also a war hero. So it's like if it's between Andrew Jackson, a war hero, or John Quincy Adams, like a fancy pants that went to Harvard and speaks 5 languages. Americans are kind of like USA. They're kind of like a Jackson, like a tough guy who shot some people. Okay. If there's any other question, anyone want to use the ask a question button? Okay, so if there's no more questions, good luck to everyone in the exam. Use Flyable to look at replays for any period that you're weak at. Look at study guides. Thank you all for coming in. We had a great, awesome section. You can watch the replay in case you missed some things. Thank you, everyone. You've been awesome. I shook up the world. Peace out.